Hello, Boomi community, and welcome back to Boomi World 2026. We are coming to you from theCUBE live here in Chicago, and we have been talking all things the future of Boomi and this wonderful ecosystem. I'm joined by my co-host John Furrier, and joining us now is Gill, SVP of Product at Boomi. Welcome, Manny.
Yeah, thank you. Great to be here.
Great keynote this morning. Anne, who we had on the show yesterday, did some great demos. I think it really brought it to life for me anyway, as an casual observer and many of the audience. Talk to me a little bit about, I guess, what has fundamentally shifted for you. You're 18 months into your role at Boomi. You came in at a very interesting time, 1 year out from your first Boomi last year.
Sure, yeah, last year being here, we launched Agent Studio. And to be honest with you, the discussions we were having with our customers were really to help them understand where they could use agents in agentic workflows. And so the conversation back then was really like, oh, this is great technology. What should we use it for? How should we prioritize it? How should we look at the return on investment? And fast forward now, one year, and the conversations have shifted. Customers now have got their head wrapped around agentic AI. They're rolling out tools at record speed. We just see the growth of Claude and Anthropic, both from coding and from a co-work perspective. And that's really driving demand for connectivity to enterprise systems.
Well, one thing you said on stage this morning, which I thought was interesting, right, was we talk a lot about the hype, the speed, the opportunity, but you said only about 30% of enterprises are currently connected, right? So
it's amazing.
Aside from this big dream idea, this agentic world, the reality is, on the ground, in the field, there's some work to be done.
Yeah.
Maybe start there, from your lens. What are the fundamental steps that need to happen right now to meet the hype?
I just think it's the urgency, right? I think back to, 5 years ago. And 5 years ago, we all went home to work remotely. And collaboration tools like Slack and Microsoft Teams needed to now support a scale that they hadn't hit before. And so fundamentally, the infrastructure needed to be upgraded. Security needed to be hardened. And we're kind of at that moment again, where now the users are demanding and the organizations are demanding these AI tools, and the way we work is just fundamentally changing. And so that requires an upgrade to this infrastructure. So we need to take that 30%, and we need to connect all the systems. Otherwise, the agents that are working on our behalf, or even the humans that are connecting to the systems, are going to run into roadblocks.
You guys have the 3 C's. I love when you see the 3 C's. Connectivity, context, and control.
Right.
Connectivity, you got to get everything connected to see things got to flow. And then context, you mentioned that before we came on camera. There's a lot going on in context. Connectivity, okay, concepts are understandable. I'm sure there's some great things to talk about, but context is kind of elusive for some people. How would you frame the context component? Is it knowledge hub? Is it explain how people should think about putting context before they get to the control.
Yeah, I mean, the way I think about context is, today we carry the context as the stewards of our business, as the business owners, right? And so we have the context of what happened last quarter. Why did this product that we built not quite meet the requirements for our customers, right? Some of it's written down, but a lot of that context is in our heads. Even within our analysts, et cetera. And now what we're saying is we're moving to this world that says, okay, well, these agents are going to work alongside us. Well, they don't have that context. They don't know necessarily why that decision was made. And so we need to put the systems in place that can surface that, capture first and foremost why those decisions were made. And if the decisions are being made through prompting AI tools, capture those, organize them in a context graph, right? So they're related, and make those available to the agents, right? But the last thing I'll say about context is that it comes in many different forms, right? So, and this goes back to the 30%. So some of those systems we need access to in real time. Some of that data we need to organize as master data, so we don't have multiple versions of our customer records. We have to have definition of our business terms defined somewhere, not just sitting in Excel.
Like metadata?
Metadata, right? So like, the example I used on stage today was ARR. What does ARR mean, first off? And second off,
that's a debate right now, right?
It means very different things.
How people
many different
calculate
people.
different stories, but
Right?
what does it mean? It's jargon, basically.
Yeah, and so, but that needs to be captured, right? It needs to be captured. When is our fiscal year, right? That needs to be captured. All of those terms need to be captured, but not only captured, they need to be now in markdown files so that agents can easily access them.
So staying on context for a second, I want to talk about a couple of components to that, right?
Yeah.
One is tacit knowledge, how you actually capture that, and is that through keyboard strokes, right? We're hearing all sorts of things that are potentially happening or not happening in enterprise. The other is this whole space around eval, right? And that kind of last mile of excellence for context.
Yes.
These are two somewhat kind of controversial space in tech right now. There's a lot of folks that have raised a lot of money in the venture space around these, but they also have like an iterative, I guess kind of lifetime, right? Or maybe shortened lifetime. What are your thoughts on, how those two roles are playing out in enterprise, tacit knowledge and evaluation?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of capturing keystrokes. Privacy comes to mind.
I mean, it's scary, right? But you hear it all the time.
Yes, I just think it's lazy, honestly. We talked about headless. Ed talked about it. I mentioned it as part of, we're making the Boomi platform also headless and embeddable. And headless is going to evolve as well, right? Where, largely it was API first. Now these APIs need to be well-formed for agents. So you don't need to capture keystrokes. You can capture the digital exhaust in a way that makes sense, right? So that's an evolution of the applications and the screens and the things. Now, certain vendors, and I won't name any names, but they're trying to restrict access to their systems, right? And I just think this is a period in time where customer demand will
drive that.
Will drive it, right?
We'll change that policy.
We'll change that policy, absolutely.
As a product leader, obviously you got the keys to the kingdom, you see the customer requirements, you got the back-end engineering. How has AI changed the product role? And as you look at the future, you got hybrid cloud, which is now standardized, cloud native. You get distributed computing, we're seeing disaggregated assets, soon there'll be AI factors at the edge. So I'm trying to think about this distributed future of agents.
Yeah.
Because distributed computing is now in play, fully hybrid with intelligence. How should you think about that? Because that's going to hit sovereignty.
Yeah.
That's going to hit all kinds of things that are complex that you guys want to simplify. So how do you view the future of distributed agents?
Right. I thought you were going to go with, how do you see your product organization working? And I was like, oh, that's a dangerous question because my product folks are probably listening.
Well, you can hit that first. Because, we heard that with Companion, the skills, they're creating clones of themselves, engineers.
Things are evolving. How we work is fundamentally evolving, right? And from a product organization and an engineering organization, our what we called PDLC, product development lifecycle, and SDLC, software development lifecycle, are starting to become AI DLC, right? Which is more around, how do we use these tools and skills, and back to, make a plug for connectivity, is these systems, the Jiras and the GitHubs, they all need to be connected, right? In order for us to get that context back into the system. And how we work amongst engineers, designers, three in a box, that's all evolving. I think the other part of your question, though, was how do we think about this distributed environment? One of the advantages that Boomi has, and this goes back to the heritage of Boomi, well before I joined, was that the problem that Boomi was trying to solve was a distributed problem, right? This is when cloud was just, and it wasn't called cloud, it was called software as a service. Yeah. And so software as a service was just emerging. And so organizations that were putting CRM in the cloud, as an example, had most of their data on premise. And so they needed this hybrid architecture where the Boomi runtime at that point called the Atom could run on premise and connect seamlessly into the cloud. That architecture has continued, and so we have the separation of the control plane, where you do the work, where you do the monitoring, with the runtime. And now the evolution of this is that runtime is starting to now consume agents. So we can run agents within that runtime. And those agents can run in the cloud, they can run on premises. On-premise coming back, by the way, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah,
I mean,
that's what the data is.
Maybe let's go there for a second, because John loves AI on the edge. We joke it's one of his hot topics, right? But and we've talked a lot about sovereign AI around the long tail opportunities for companies like Boomi over the last couple of days. Talk to us a little bit about what it is like architecting, this next wave of sovereign AI, though, right? Because there are some nuances to how things will be managed.
Well, I think this is where the opportunity that's emerging is around small language models, right? Yeah. And when we look at it from a requirements perspective, get back to product management, is, sovereignty is one, latency is another one, and then the third is cost, right? Costs are getting way out of control. And so when we think of fine-tuned small language models for specific edge tasks, we're able to reduce latency, put them in a controlled environment so that they're in, on premises, but then also that cost really gets in control. So it's that architecture. Now, the base models are evolving, they're getting better. And then also the scaffolding that's required with the harnesses to be able to fine-tune the models, to be able to download the models into these environments. Having said all that for a customer sounds pretty frightening, right? And so our job as Boomi is to abstract that complexity so that you don't even know you're fine-tuning it. Right? You're just telling it the parameters of what you're trying to optimize for, and behind the scenes, we've got the infrastructure to be doing that fine-tuning and manage those models for you.
And Manny, you've had an interesting career. You've been at SAP, you've been at Microsoft, right? Both those companies have done something very well, and that is, dare I say it, a little bit of vendor lock, right? It's hard to leave those companies. I was at Microsoft too, I know that model. When we think about this next layer of frontier labs, of orchestrators, of the harness layer of AI, and all of the terms we hear right now, how do you think about it from the perspective of lock-in, of being in bed with one lab, we hear a lot about Claude Code, having a huge take on the enterprise. But again, what are the longer term risks, do you think, around this?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think about this a lot. I think it's really dangerous to get too excited by one model, right? So we go through these waves. Rewind a year ago and it was like, oh my gosh, Google Gemini is just too good. And then OpenAI is too good. And then recently Claude is too good, right? And so everybody is kind of leapfrogging. But from a customer perspective, where's your IP, right? Your IP is in your data. It's in the skills that you create that are going to instruct the models. And it's the connectivity to your systems, right? So you take context, you take now skills, and then you take and connectivity. Those you need to abstract away from being very specific to an LLM, right? And so organizations need to set those up so that, hey, if I want to give context, give my skills, give my connectivity, and switch the model, I'm not locked in, right? And I showed this on screen with Boomi Connect, was sales marketing using ChatGPT Enterprise to connect to Gong, pull out my action items, and then upload them into Salesforce, versus the finance person using the Claude model, because it does a great job of the, working with Excel and the financial models. But it's the same layer of skills and connectivity that I own.
It's the old saying, the tool for the job.
Yes.
Talk about the importance of Connect, because the two things that jumped out at us this week, we both loved both products, is obviously the Companion, I thought was great innovation. The open source going crazy for that got out early. But Connect is huge, because that brings API, concepts of APIs with agent delegation and interactions, and data and agents need to work together. So talk about the importance of Connect.
Yeah.
And why that's important with third party, because you're seeing payment rails coming on board, you're starting to see more advanced stuff coming.
Yeah, I think this is where MCP comes to life, right? We've been talking about MCP for over a year now, and really, has it done anything? No, but I think this is where MCP comes to life, right? Because this is the, when agents or machine to machine, the old protocols continue to work really, really well, right? Because you need reliability, you need things that you trust. But now, I spent the first part of my career in the business intelligence space, building products like Crystal Reports and analytics tools, et cetera. I really feel like now these tools are at that point where business users are going to use this as their primary. So now where Boomi Connect fits in is that business intelligence isn't just consuming, a static report to see the numbers, but you're interacting with it, right? So you're using that data to further analyze, do your research, update your records. And so now you've got an entire workflow there, right, at your fingertips. And so in order to make that real, you need governed access to these systems. And IT and the CISOs, they're terrified, because these systems really were not created for those workloads, right? And so they may have the security policy set up, but those security policies, as soon as you put an LLM in front of it, it finds all the backdoors. Right?
Because you went there, I'm going to go there too.
Sure.
Mythos, right? We saw the headline, we heard the reaction, people were saying that folks were having panic attacks in cyber teams at banks, etc. What was your initial reaction to that news headline, and how do you think about it? How do you plan for it?
It's a great question. The first thing that came to my mind was reality versus what they're saying. At that point, I just don't know, right? You hear a lot from the the thought leaders in the space, where it's like doomer kind of narratives, then but then they're being used to actually, push their agenda, right, and drive demand for their services. So I take it a little bit with a grain of salt. However, I can see that these models getting so powerful, right, that they can start to understand security vulnerabilities, et cetera. But we've seen this movie before, right? Those things will get out there, and then there will be the security vendors will plug those holes, et cetera, and then we'll work on our code base, and we'll be looking for those things as well. So I think it's just an evolution thing. I felt like it was more of a story than it was real. So.
Well, Manny, I think we're going to close on that, because I like that message, right? Let's all calm the F down and try and stay steady the ship. And I guess in some ways, right, hope for the best, believe in the innovation. So Manny, Gill, thank you so much for joining us on theCUBE.
Thanks for coming
Thank you.
I'm Gemma Allen, coming to you from Boomi World 2026. We are live on theCUBE, and we're having some great conversations with folks shaping the future of innovation for enterprise. Stay tuned.